The Atlanta Braves took 2 out of 3 from the first place Milwaukee Brewers over the weekend, but a lot of the attention, maybe rightfully, is going to go to Bryce Elder getting blown up on Sunday. Let's talk about it. Yes, welcome on into Braves Today, a production of the Belief Podcast Network and presented to you by FanDuel. I'm your host, Lindsey Crosby, author of the Braves Today newsletter over at bravestoday.com. I want to preview the San Diego Padres. We'll see them for 3 in San Diego starting tonight. Have your pots of coffee ready. Going to be super late series out in the West Coast. Last West Coast road trip of the year. Love that. But before we do that, let's talk about the weekend against the Brewers. Winning the first 2 games, even when it felt and looked like you probably shouldn't have. Losing game 3, what Bryce Elder and the team said about his performance on Sunday, and all of that. And this weekend did not necessarily go as we all expected, right? If I had to pick 3 games in this series, and based on the matchups, the one that Atlanta should have won, I probably would have, based on the pitching matchups, have only chosen one that Atlanta would have won, and that would have been a Chris Sale start. Even though they haven't always given him run support, I feel like I just can't ever pick against the Braves in a Chris Sale start. But no, they win game 1 against Jacob Misiorowski, and Martín Pérez outduels Jacob Misiorowski, which is the absolute wildest part of this whole thing. That he had a better pitching performance, depending on how you evaluate this, right? A better pitching performance than Jacob Misiorowski in game 1. Very improbable when you look at it on its face. Martín Pérez was facing somebody who throws 14 miles an hour harder than him, okay? His his fastball velocity was 89 miles an hour in this one. Misiorowski's throwing 103. But he finishes with 1 run allowed on 6 hits. He walks 2, he strikes out 5. Jacob Misiorowski has more strikeouts, but he allows more runs than Martín Pérez does. And he had 10 whiffs, maxed out at 89.6 on the four-seamer. Misiorowski had 18 whiffs, maxes out at 104.2. But it comes down to, it's more than just whiffs and strikeouts. And I am guilty of this. As an amateur pitching nerd who looks at a lot of data, Martín Pérez is one of those guys that I've underestimated because all of the conventional statistics or the conventional data we use to analyze pitching doesn't properly evaluate his ability to generate ground balls, to minimize hard contact. When you look at him from a stuff plus perspective and a whiffs and all of that, he's underwhelming. But Martín Pérez, 7 ground ball outs, average exit velocity of 86.4 miles an hour. And so Atlanta's in the game. The 9th inning gets a little hairy, right? Raisel Iglesias is in. Hadn't appeared in a game in a week. And Christian Yelich walks, 1-out walk. Jackson Chourio gets him to third base with a double. Bryce Terang scores Yelich. And Milwaukee sends Chourio from second. And Chourio's a good runner. He's a young, exciting player. He's a very good runner. Eli White comes up firing. 95.3 mile an hour throw to the plate. Drake Baldwin catches the ball as Chourio sliding into his glove, holds on to the ball through the contact to get the out. Iglesias gets a strikeout of William Contreras. Ball game. Improbable win. One we did not see coming, right? Like if you asked me going into this series, hey, what's the one game you're probably going to lose? It's Martín Pérez versus Jacob Misiorowski. Given the fact that Misiorowski had allowed 1 earned run since the start of May coming into this outing. He had a 60-inning streak of 1 earned run Atlanta hangs 2 on him in the same inning. But the big takeaway for me from that game, great win, but it was how all of the role players and the depth pieces were the difference here for Atlanta. Obviously, I mentioned the Eli White output assist. Martín Pérez was a guy that was not expected to be in the rotation to start the season. When they reported to camp, there was zero expectations that Martín Pérez would be in the rotation. He wasn't even a favorite to be on the roster. But he goes out there and outduels Jacob Misiorowski from an earned run perspective in the outing. Eli White also made a really good defensive play in the outfield like an inning before that kind of gets overlooked. Ball in the left field corner. He's sprinting full speed into the corner, catches it, slams into the wall. The runner on second, who represented the tying run, was at third when White caught this ball. He was going to make, it was only like 1 out. Like he was going to make sure that he scored to tie the game up. And he had to turn around and retreat all the way to second base. Tying run? Maybe not the tying run. I'm trying to remember from Friday. Anyway, point is, great contributions from Eli White, who is not a guy that we expected to be getting a ton of starts this season. The original plan going into camp, remember, was Jurickson Profar and Mike Yastrzemski rotating through that third outfield spot with Profar at DH when Yastrzemski was in the field. White wasn't in the plans. You can keep going. Jorge Mateo made some great defensive plays at shortstop in that game. He got another start for Ha-Seong Kim. And the start of Atlanta's 2-run rally off of Misiorowski in the 6th inning only happens because Jorge Mateo hits 31.1 feet per second on a ground ball to the shortstop and beats out the throw to first. It's a routine ground ball out. But like 30 feet per second is considered elite. He hits 31.1. It's just the role players played a massive, outsized role in that win. And then when you get to Saturday, another improbable win for the Braves. Ozzie Albies walks it off late. And it was something where Atlanta was down 3-2 entering the 9th inning. And they had been fine with Chris Sale. It was Sale gave up 2 runs over 5 2/3, right? Couldn't get that last out in the 6th. Ended up having to come out just short of a quality start. Happened a couple times for him now. But they rally late. And those runs, part of the reason Chris Sale had to come out is Ozzie made a defensive error in the 6th inning. Long story short here, there's a runner on first, and Ozzie gets a hard grounder, tailor-made double play ball. He should be able to turn a double play. And it clings off his glove, and he bobbles it for a second, and then he goes to second anyway. And he's too late to get the out at second because of the bobble. And it's a little bit of a rushed off-target throw when Mateo drops it. They get 0 outs. And so originally was ruled a hit. They come back like an inning later and they change the scoring to a fielding error. No, it wasn't ruled a hit. It was ruled a fielder's choice. Anyway, they come back and ruled it a fielding error. And because of that, the inning is extended and Chris Sale has to throw a bunch more pitches and eventually he hits 100 pitches and has to come out of the game. Ozzie giveth and Ozzie taketh away in Saturday's game. Right? Like he broke up Kyle Harrison's perfect game in the 5th inning with a solo shot. Then he gives up 2 runs, or he has an error that results in 2 unearned runs in a 6th inning that Chris Sale can't get out of. And then he walks it off with a homer in the 9th. And what's cool, Ozzie talked about this specific version of the Atlanta Braves, this roster, about how this is one of the 2 most special versions of the roster that he's ever been on in Atlanta. And the other one was the 2021 World Series team. Quote, "This team is really special. I've been on this team for a long time with a really special group each year, But this one is definitely, I'll say, one of the top two that I have on the list. It's a special team, great group of guys. And Walt Weiss was like, coming from a great source, and said this team feels a little bit special. The way they've responded to a difficult week, taking the first two against Milwaukee, and all of that. I see it. I understand. I believe that there's something. It's not a perfect roster by any stretch of the imagination, but there is something special about this team, about how a lot of the role players have been able to step up and how they are greater than the sum of their parts. And I think that's the magic formula. It's almost when you get to the postseason and the World Series, it feels like the teams that win aren't the teams that are just carried by one or two superstars. It's the teams that get outsized performances from other players, from role players, from pieces. Think back to the 2021 World Series run. I'm pretty sure every single MVP of every single round was a different outfielder that we acquired at the deadline. I think Jock got it for the wild card. I think Rosario had it for the NLCS. Soler had it for the World Series. And important players, but not expected to carry the team. And they did. And each guy stepped up in a different round. And they carried the team. And despite some of the struggles last week, I get some of those vibes from the 2026 Atlanta Braves. But Sunday was ugly. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about what Bryce Elder said about his start. Let's talk about what it means going forward. We'll do that next, right here on Braves Today. But first, this episode's brought to you by our friends at IQ Bar, our exclusive snack, hydration, and coffee sponsor. IQ Bar protein bars, IQ Mix hydration mixes, and IQ Joe mushroom-infused coffees are the tasty, low-sugar brain and body fuel that you need to win your day. The Ultimate Sampler Pack's a great way to try all of the IQ Bar products and flavors. You get 9 IQ bars, 8 IQ Mix sticks, and 4 IQ Joe sticks. And all IQ Bar products are clean label certified and entirely free from gluten, dairy, soy, GMOs, and artificial ingredients. With over 20,000 5-star reviews and counting, more people than ever are fueling their busy lifestyles with IQ Bar's brain and body boosting bars, hydration mixes, and mushroom-infused coffees. And the Ultimate Sampler Pack includes all three. Right now, IQ Bar is offering Braves Today listeners 20% off of all IQ Bar products, including the Ultimate Sampler Pack, plus free shipping. To get your 20% off, text MLB to 64,000. That's MLB to 64000. That's MLB to 64,000. Message and data rates may apply. See terms for details. The Braves lost on Sunday 9-4. And the good news is Bryce Elder pitched 5 scoreless innings. The bad news is he was on the field for 6 innings. In the second frame, he gave up 8 runs to the Milwaukee Brewers. I went back and rewatched the inning before I sat down to do this podcast. And my thought process is the same as it was live when I was watching the inning. It didn't feel, based on locations, like it should have been an 8-run inning. And I went back and checked the transcripts and stuff. Bryce Elder said the same thing. Quote, I guess simple as that sounds, but that inning, other than the pitch to Contreras, like a couple sliders were up, but it wasn't 8 runs bad, maybe 3 or 4. I guess that's part of it. You try to figure this game out. You're never going to, so you might as well stay at it. When you go back and I'm not saying anything like this happened. Jake Mastriani on the Braves postcast, we do that after every single game over on Locked On Braves and Locked On Sports Atlanta. He made the observation that when you watched that inning, there were some good locations that they got really good swings on. To the point where he actually said live, he started to wonder, was Bryce Elder tipping his pitches? Because to open the frame, back-to-back singles, and then both those runners advance into scoring position on a ground out. Sal Frelick brought them both in on a double. And at that point, all of those batted balls were on pitches that were on the black somewhere. And I know y'all know this, but just to help people who don't necessarily know, on the black refers to the black border that is around home plate, meaning that he wasn't leaving pitches over the heart of the plate. He's leaving pitches on the edges of the plate, which is arguably, if you're going to throw a pitch in the strike zone, that's where you want it. And some of these were, I say on the black, but they were down or up. The point is, they were on the edges of the strike zone. They weren't hanging over the middle of the plate. It was good. It was arguably good locations, right? If you're going to throw a strike, let it just barely be a strike versus in this heart of the plate. And these Milwaukee hitters went up or down or outside or whatever to get these pitches and get good swings and quality contact on every single one of them. And after that, you saw a little, as Elder got into the inning and the pitches started to stack up, and there's a little bit of fatigue that goes along with that, he started to have a couple bad locations, right? He hung a sinker to Cooper Pratt. It was a ground out. But then he executed a slider on the inner third knee high to David Hamilton. David Hamilton not only went down to get it, but he got quality contact on it. He hit a double to the left center gap. That scored Frelick from second. Christian Yelich then was the beneficiary of some rough locations, right? He got down 0-2, and then Elder kept trying to spot some sinkers or cutters inside and down and just couldn't really find the edge of the zone. So he went from 0-2 to a walk. And then Jackson Churio got a slider that was hanging a little bit. An elevated slider shouldn't have been there. He singled off of that. And then Bryce Terang got a slider that was hanging, a bad location, singled off of that. But then William Contreras gets a thigh-high inside sinker. And he gets out around it and homers on it. Not a bad location. And so it ends up, it's an 8-run inning. And I'm not here to say that Bryce Elder is a perfect pitcher or anything. I do agree with him on the point of when you go back and you rewatch it, looking at the locations, it doesn't feel like it should have been an 8-run inning. Walt Weiss excused this a little bit to a little bit of what happens in baseball, right? He didn't make a fatigue excuse. Elder was on extra rest. I think that's a conversation that we continue to have with Bryce Elder as a sinker baller as far as the amount of rest he has. So the 3 blowups that he's had recently. He had a blowup in Boston the end of May. It was 5 earned runs, 6 total runs on 9 hits and 3 1/3. No home runs, 1 walk, 1 strikeout. Then he has a blow-up in New York against the Mets. 6 runs on 10 hits in 4 innings. Gives up 2 homers, 2 walks, 2 strikeouts. And then there's this Milwaukee start. His ERA went from 197 before the Boston outing. Boston, 2 quality starts, 2 blow-ups. It's now 371. So he gains almost 2 runs on his ERA in a span of 5 starts. And I actually had the stat on social media yesterday. Going into that Boston start, the most runs he had allowed in a game was 3. And he had done it 3 separate times. And all 3 of those were quality starts, right? 6 2/3 in Washington, 3 runs. 7 runs in Philly. 7 innings, 3 runs in Philly. 3 runs in 8 innings at home versus Boston. That was that Saturday game where they sent him back out for the 8th because the entire bullpen was dead. But in this stretch, he gives up 24 earned runs in 26 innings, 19 strikeouts, 8 walks, 5 home runs. It's an 8.31 ERA. I think 2 things can be true at once. People are getting tired of me saying that, and I've tried to be mindful about how I say that. Bryce Elder was probably not as good as his 197 ERA in the first 2 months of the season. Bryce Elder is also not as bad as his 8.31 ERA in the last 5 starts. What is really interesting to me, Bryce Elder's ERA right now on the season, 3.71. His field and independent pitching on the season is 3.79. You could argue he is pitching to his talent level. And he is doing exactly what is expected of him via the ERA estimators. What's really frustrating is the way that he got to this. Rather than just cruising and, giving up a couple runs in each outing, he looked dominant for a while. He looked terrible DFA quality over a 5-start span, even though 2 of those were quality starts and 3 of them were blow-ups. And again, all of the ERA estimators say that right now, he is where he should be. His expected ERA is 3.48. He's been unlucky from that perspective. The question for the Braves is twofold. 1, can they figure out what's going wrong with Elder right now? Again, 3 bad starts in his last 5 outings. Jake wondered on the postcast if he was tipping his pitches somehow. I already said that. I realized that now. I'm looking, it's not an explainer. It's not an obvious kind of thing. I'm looking again at the days of rest thing. We've had this conversation now about Bryce Elder. When he gets additional rest, he seems to struggle. And there are times when he needs it, arguably. And Walt Weiss talked about this. Quote, I do think at times over the course of the season, there's some fatigue and dead arm periods. I don't know if that's the case in particular in New York or recently. I do think that can be a factor over the course of a season. That New York start, that was 6 runs on 10 hits in 4 innings. He was on extra rest there. They had given him 6 days of rest before that start. And I've relayed this anecdote multiple times on the pod here. Being in the press box and talking to Joe Simpson and him saying, a sinker baller, you always want him to be a little bit fatigued. You don't want him to have extra rest. And if you go back and you rewatch that second inning yesterday, with that in mind, a lot of those sinkers are not in the bottom third of the zone, right? Or they're in the bottom third of the zone, but they're on the black, on the outside or inside. They're not down. You can see that. And this is not in any way a statistically valid sample, I don't believe, but if you go and you look at how he's performed this season on days of rest, 4 days of rest in his starts, Bryce Elder has a 2.70 ERA. Regular rest, 9 of his 16 starts have been on regular rest, 2.70 ERA. You give him 1 additional day, there's 4 starts there, he has a 3.20. If you give him 6 or more days of rest, he has a 7.88 ERA. Both the Mets blow up and the Milwaukee blow up were on 6 days of rest. He pitched on the 7th against the Pirates on regular rest, 2 runs in 6 innings. He got a week before his next start against the Mets, 6 runs on 10 hits in 4 innings. And then he got a week before he faced off against Milwaukee, 8 runs on 12 hits in 6 innings. I'm not saying it's as simple as start him every 5th day, but a very small and probably non-predictive sample size says it really is that simple. And again, not going to believe that is absolutely true in Bryce Elder's situation, but it's probably not helping. I just find that idea really interesting. If you go and you look at his career numbers in those situations with a much larger sample size, they still bear that out. 4 days of rest. This is 37 start sample, 3.58 ERA. 5 days of rest, 27 game sample, 4.21 ERA. 6 or more days of rest, 30 games sample here, 5.68 ERA. You add roughly a run to his ERA every additional day of rest you give him. I'm not saying it's as simple as that, But I'm also not saying that he is DFA worthy after 3 bad starts, which a lot of people on social media seem to be vindicated that Bryce Elder's back to being the bum they thought he was. It's frustrating that we're having these conversations, or that we have to have these conversations about him. And at the end of the day, if he doesn't like it, he could have played better. I'm not saying it's not a warranted conversation. But right now, one, you don't have any other options. Herson Waldrop's still working his way back. He didn't make it through 5 yesterday. He threw, I think, 70 or so pitches. He looked pretty decent. He's not ready yet. He's probably got 1 or 2 more times through before you can call him up. But you've got to figure out what's wrong with Bryce Elder. Maybe it's as simple as that. I don't know. Maybe it's not. But let's look and let's figure it out. In just a minute, let's talk about the Padres. You've got a 3-game series starting tonight, and this is a really interesting Padres team. We'll do all of that next, right here on Braves Today. The final thought here on Bryce Elder and the Braves, something I realized I didn't get to as soon as I hit the button for the break. It was 1 game. Shout out to Baseball Doc and the Braves Today Discord for pointing this out. Sometimes it feels like we have the football mentality when it comes to baseball. It's a 162-game season. The conversation around the Brewers series probably should have been questions about Bryce Elder, but also you won 2 out of the 3 games. Now, did the process feel entirely sustainable? Maybe not. The Brewers had really good batted ball inputs in the first 2 games and really poor batted ball results in the first 2 games. If you replay those games 10 times out of 10, the Brewers probably win the series. But the football mentality of every single game is so important. I really noticed that creeping into this weekend and how the conversation's dominated by Bryce Elder. I just find that interesting, frustrating. I don't quite know. But anyway. All right. Padres this weekend. Grant Holmes versus Michael King is the matchup tonight. It is not necessarily... I don't know what to think here. Michael King's not necessarily having the season that he expected to have. But this whole, the Padres in general aren't having the season they expected to have. Holmes versus King tonight. Braves actually are a slight underdog in this. As of time of recording, it's very close. They see it as a low-scoring game, over under 7.5 runs on Braves Today sponsor FanDuel. Money line, it's Braves 106, minus 106. Padres minus 110. So it is as close to a pick'em as you can get. Tuesday, J.R. Ritchie versus a TBA, although Griffin Canning would line up for that one. And then Wednesday, Martín Pérez versus Randy Vasquez. You feel like the Braves would be favored in any Martín Pérez start going forward because, again, he outdueled Jacob Misiorowski on Friday night. But the Padres themselves are having a really weird season. They are 39-37. They're second place in the West. But the way that they built this record was really odd. They were 18-7 in the month of April. 720 winning percentage. They even briefly were in first place in the National League West over the Los Angeles Dodgers in the month of April. And briefly, literally like 1 game. They were tied with the Dodgers for half a week after winning 2 out of 3 in Colorado. And then they beat Arizona to go up half a game when the Dodgers lost. And then they lost to Arizona. The Dodgers won, and they flopped from half a game up to half a game back. And they retook that lead briefly in May, half a game again. And then that deficit's grown all the way to 9 games since then. Because the month of May, they went 13-15. And the month of June, they went 7-11. And what's happening is they had a lot of outsized performance from role players early. And then as those role players have cooled off or have gotten injured, Ramon Laureano's out, I believe, for the rest of the year now. They've completely come back to earth. You look at these injuries real quick. Ramon Laureano, hip surgery for a torn labrum. He's out for the rest of the year. Jake Cronenworth went down with a concussion. He's been out for over a month with concussion symptoms. May 4th was the injury. It's now June 22nd, and he is still on the injured list. Freddie Fermin is coming up on the end of his 10 days on the IL for a concussion. Luis Campusano, the other catcher, has a fractured toe. He went down in early May. They lost some pitching. Nick Pivetta went down in April. Matt Waldron went down in May. Reliever Jeremiah Estrada went down at the beginning of June. They've lost quite a few pieces, and the performance has dropped off. But then also you have to remember that some of this offense has just been bad. Fernando Tatis has rebounded from a batting average perspective. Rough start to the season. Fernando Tatis is batting .285. His slugging is .358. He has 2 homers on the season. He didn't hit his first homer until earlier this month. He's playing a lot of second base for them as well as right field. It's not just, he's been doing both. But Manny Machado leads the team in homers with 13. He's also batting .179 with a .625 OPS. They're everyday players. The 5 guys who are qualified on leaderboards, all of them are underperforming. Gavin Sheets is the primary guy at first base. .230 average, .766 OPS. That's the best OPS of any of these guys. I said Tatis is a .707. Xander Bogaerts, .229 average, .654 OPS. Jackson Merrill, .216 average, .636 OPS. Manny Machado, .179 average, leads them in homers with 13, .625 OPS. A significant portion of this offense is underperforming. A significant portion of this offense is also paid a lot of money. Xander Bogaerts is making a lot of money. Manny Machado is making a lot of money. Fernando Tatis is making a lot of money. If Braves fans thought having Austin Riley making $22 million and struggling offensively was bad, imagine paying Manny Machado $25 million and Bogaerts $25 million and Tatis $20 million and Merrill's only making $2 million this year. But still, paying those guys all of that amount of money to be bad. Could be worse, right? And next year, by the way, it gets even worse because Tatis goes from 20 to 25. Machado goes from 25 to 39 million. Merrill goes from 2 to 7. Merrill's going to rebound. He's too young to continue being this bad for this long. He's going to rebound. He's just having a rough season. Machado, Bogaerts, they're in their 30s. Machado's 34. Bogaerts is 33. Tatis is only 27. He should rebound as well. But just, it's ugly. This is an ugly roster. This is an ugly contract situation. This is ugly performance. And so that underperformance by those 4 guys, Tatis, Bogaerts, Merrill, Machado, combined with the role players getting hurt and going down, means that their performance has struggled. But this is just like the Giants series. Remember when I mentioned previewing the Giants series? It's, hey, this Giants team may be bad from a win-loss perspective, but these are guys that are talented and can hurt you. I think Willy Adames had either 2 or 3 home runs in the 2 games they played. Bad season, but he's talented and can hurt you. Atlanta has to be careful in this series because these are all hitters that, yes, they're having bad seasons. Yes, they are struggling. But also, yes, they can hurt you. Michael King, 3.60 ERA. He's been their best starter this year. The goal here should be to get a lead against the starter and don't let them go to this bullpen. Because if they go to this bullpen, you are in trouble. This Padres bullpen is right on par with Atlanta's bullpen for one of the best in baseball. And the way that they do it's a little bit different than how Atlanta does it, right? They've lost some guys. Jeremiah Estrada's on the IL right now. But Mason Miller in the ninth. He's right there with Jacob Misiorowski for the hardest throwing pitcher in baseball. He has an 0.87 ERA. He's thrown in 30 games. He's thrown 31 innings. He's allowed 3 earned runs. He struck out 61 batters. He strikes out 2 batters an inning, pretty much. He is perfect 20 for 20 in save situations. Perfect. You can't let the Padres get to the ninth of the lead. And you saw against Misiorowski, you saw Atlanta's hitters had a plan. They were doing a 2-strike approach on every single pitch. Shortening up, not a max swing, just trying to get a ball in play. And they were successful at times doing that. They put up 2 runs on Misiorowski in 1 inning. It's more than he allowed since the beginning of May. It's going to be like that when you get to the ninth against Mason Miller. But it's not just Mason Miller, right? They've got other guys who are good. Lefty Yuki Matsui, 24 2/3 innings, 1.46 ERA. Lefty Wandy Peralta, 35 2/3 innings, 2.02 ERA. Heck, Jason Adam has a 2.54 ERA. His problem has been the long boy. He's given up 5 homers. The 8 runs he's allowed in 28 1/3 innings, he's allowed 5 home runs, which is accounted for most of those runs. So other than a couple little blips here and there, this bullpen's fantastic. The goal is just don't let them get to it. And that's Atlanta's offense is going to have to win this series. When you look at, you've got Grant Holmes, you've got J.R. Ritchie in games 1 and 2. It's got to be your offense. If it's not your offense, you're going to be in trouble. The Bats need to make the trip out west. The good news is, this is your final trip out west. After this, you're done. It's wild that you've had more West Coast trips than you have had series against the Mets. But there you go. Reminder, these are all late games. Tonight, 10 p.m. Eastern, it's an ESPN game. So heads up on that as well. Probably going to take a little longer than usual because it's on ESPN. Tuesday, 9:40 p.m. Wednesday, 8:40 p.m. I'll have a scouting report before all 3, both live on YouTube. I'll drop the audio in your podcast feed as soon as it's done. There'll be an accompanying article going along with that. That's where we really break down what each pitcher does and all that stuff. So stay tuned for that. We'll have a postcast over on Locked On Braves and Locked On Sports Atlanta after each one of these games, even though, yes, tonight's will probably be about 1 o'clock in the morning before it happens. We'll still have that for you. And I'll be bringing you pods to the best of my ability all week. That'll do it for the Braves Today podcast. Please video, please subscribe. We'll see you next time on Braves Today.